Welcome to New Whistles of Detroit. I'm your host, Joe Chap. We're going to be talking about Detroit Tigers baseball. It was an interesting game today from the Detroit Tigers perspective because a player that has been getting a lot of scrutiny came to play, and he's been pretty good in the last 7 days, and that is Spencer Torkelson. And Torkelson has been playing out of his mind, 5 home runs in 7 days. It kind of leads you to believe what this kid can potentially become. It leads you to believe that this kid can be what he was drafted to be. And ultimately, when you look at this roster and you look at the way they kind of floundered in the middle of the season when they lost Riley Green to injury, you kind of think like this Detroit Tigers team is better than their record. They could be in a better position if they didn't deal with the injury to a key player like Riley Green. Because when you look at them right now, I mean, they're not playing terribly bad baseball. They're playing at a decent level. You know, Spencer Torkelson's playing good. Riley Green is playing good. Kerry Carpenter the last 7 days has been out of his mind. And when you look at this Detroit Tigers team moving forward, and this is one of the things I was talking about in past videos, was when you look at the Detroit Tigers and you look at what Scott Harris inherited and what he had to do to kind of get some talent infusions into this team, into this farm system. They traded and got Justin Hunter Malloy from the Braves. They went and traded Michael Lorenzen for the kid from Pittsburgh. Name's escaping me right now, but they have some players. But what the Detroit Tigers did ultimately was they went in the draft, they drafted 9 high school players, and they said, we're going to let it ride. Now, it leads me to believe. Now, I know there was minimal moves from Scott Harris this year in terms of free agency, in terms of trying to round out the roster, but I truly felt like what Scott Harris was doing was he was trying to figure out what this roster could potentially be. I felt it was a smart play by him because there wasn't any expectations on this team whatsoever. I mean, it's a new GM. He's coming into a situation where you don't really know what the team can be. He put a little bit of a stamp on it with some moves that he made, but nonetheless, there wasn't any like sizable moves. So I liked what he did, where he didn't make the sizable moves, and he kind of wanted to see how it was from the perspective of sitting in that general manager's chair for the Detroit Tigers. I mean, he's a VP of baseball operations, but let's not get it twisted. The guy is playing the acting GM for the Detroit Tigers. So I think he wanted to take kind of like a soft approach. You could say it's soft, but Brad Holmes did that with the Lions. Obviously they made that trade with Matthew Stafford, but that was because Stafford demanded a trade. It's a little bit different than what Scott Harris inherited. He didn't inherit no one where they wanted to leave and they were a willing participant, because if you're honest with yourself, there's not many trade pieces on this team. So there's gonna be some money that's gonna be opening for the Detroit Tigers. With Miguel Cabrera retiring eventually after the season, there's gonna be money to spend, and I think he's going to spend it. And I think if I was Scott Harris, and what I saw from the Detroit Tigers, what I saw from my young guys, what I saw from some of these pitchers, Tarek Skubal, Reese Olson, Alex Faedo, for the most part. Obviously Joey Wentz has struggled at some time at a lot of points, but you're gonna get Casey Mize back. You're gonna get Spencer Turnbull back. Matt Manning is gonna have another year. You just look at this Tigers roster, and you go, if they add a couple of bats, they add a couple of players in the bullpen or in the pitching staff in some way, either a starter, a bullpen arm, couple bullpen arms, could you potentially see them battling it out for the AL Central? And I, without a doubt, can see that. Obviously they don't have the talent of the teams around baseball right now, like the Dodgers, like the Tampa Bay Rays. They don't have the prospect pool of the Baltimore Orioles. They don't have the team like the Tampa Bay Rays. But ultimately, they do have two good players that you can look at and go, I think they're going to be pretty damn good. And I think Spencer Torkelson's a bit key part of that. And I think Riley Green's a key part of that. And I think I'm starting to appreciate Kerry Carpenter, not just as like a when his team is good, he's not going to be here. I think he could be a guy that could help you in your lineup, and I think you're going to need a guy like that because we still have 5 years or 4 years left of Javi Baez, and ultimately, it sucks because I don't like Javi Baez at all. But he's going to be here for a while unless they just write him a check, which I highly doubt. But what I've seen from Scott Harris and the way that he has approached this offseason, I'm a little bit more relieved of what he's probably seeing from the general manager's chair. That Spencer Torkelson is turning into a good player. Riley Green was a key part of this team, and he is a really good player. Gary Carpenter, he's turning into a pretty good player. Now you're gonna have to add pieces to this team, whether it be at the catcher position, second base, first base. You're gonna have to add a bat that can hit, and that's the thing that the Detroit Tigers are really gonna have to go off during the offseason. But I just looked at this game today, and this is gonna post tomorrow on Thursday, August 17th. And I looked at this team and I was like, look, it hasn't been the funnest year for the Detroit Tigers, but I can see them having a team next year where they're actually fun and enjoyable to watch. I look at Spencer Torkelson, the 2 home run day. He's been hot lately. So has Kerry Carpenter. So has Riley Green. Veerling's been a pleasant surprise the way he's been, hitting the ball in the last 7 days. It's very interesting. And it's if I'm Scott Harris, obviously when I go into the off season, and obviously when we start the Tigers recap of the season, one of the main points I'm going to point to is when they lost Riley Green. That's when their steam kind of went down, and they were not the same team without Riley Green. So they gotta add some bats into the lineup for next year, and I think this Detroit Tigers team could potentially be a team that competes for a Central next year. I feel like obviously you're too far behind right now, but if you would have won a couple games here and there and kind of stayed pace with Minnesota, maybe you can eke it out. But they had Minnesota's number all year. They just lost games, to they lost too many clunkers. They've had a lot of clunkers this year. But I look at the guys like Spencer Torkelson, I look at Riley Green, I look at Kerry Carpenter, I look at Tarek Skubal, Resource, and I think is going to be a key part of the future, whether it be in the bullpen or a starter. Matt Manning, he's still got some things to figure out. We don't know what Casey Mize is going to come back like. We don't know what Spencer Turnbull is going to come back like. So there's a lot of questions on this Detroit Tigers team, but the one thing that I think a lot of Tigers fans can kind of ease their mind is the young guys that you have, Torkelson and Green. They seem like they can be really good players moving forward. And I think that next year, I think they're both going to take another step up and become, some really good to elite players in the Major League Baseball. So we will see what will happen, but Scott Harris definitely has some, moves that he can make in the offseason to make this team a lot better moving forward. And we'll definitely bring it to you. And we'll have our end of the season recap. We'll have some Tigers video mixed in, but there's not really much to go off right now because they're not in contention. We're gonna obviously talk about them, but not a lot of people are gonna listen. So if you're a Tigers fan, we're gonna bring you videos. So subscribe to the channel. We'll give you some more Tigers stuff, and I'm gonna try to do a Tigers video every week and kind of get it to you, maybe daily, but I think the Tigers are in a much better place than I thought they would be at this point in the season, and I'm intrigued at what they could be next season. So when the season ends, we'll do the recap and see where they are at that point in time, and kind of go over what we could add in the offseason to help this Detroit Tigers team make a Central run next year. I'm your host, Joe Chap, and I will see you in the next Tigers video. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I appreciate you guys if you subscribe. So I will see you in the next video.